You may have noticed I had the same shirt on I had on last time, so I thought I should address that. So what's happened is back in February, our youth group did a Valentine's dinner for everyone, and they served us, and we had a beautiful time. Well, Nicki found this shirt online, and she just loved it. So she bought this shirt for me to wear for the Valentine's dinner. And you know what?
And we had a little bit of a disagreement before the dinner where he didn't want to wear that new shirt. He really wanted to wear a different shirt. But I strongly convinced him that this was the shirt he needed to wear, so he wore it.
I did. And you know, the funny thing is, all of the women of the church fell in love with that same shirt. So as all of us guys showed up to this Valentine's dinner, we're all wearing the same shirt. So there were like 16 of us at this dinner.
There was 21.
21. It was a scheme. So then a group of us guys thought, well, if our wives love this shirt so much, we're going to wear it every Sunday. So this is our church shirt. So since February, every time I go to church, this is my shirt that I wear. So I knew you guys weren't part of that, so I didn't want you to think, we do have laundry at the house. And I do own more than one shirt. But this is my official church shirt. So when we go to church, this is the shirt I wear.
And I said to him, you're not really going to do that here. I mean, Really? Yes, he was. And I love a good prank, and so does he. And I thought, I'm finally going to get him. Because he's always the one that gets me. No, I lost that one big time. And he has literally worn it to church every Sunday since February. Our entire church thinks it's hilarious.
There's a bunch of us. We have a good time with it.
Yeah.
We do. That's right. So if you could put James 1:19 up. And again, that's James 1:19 if you're looking on your paper Bible. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And if you could also put up Proverbs 18:13. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. And I lead that into, this brings us into communication. Communication is such an important part of marriage, is you have to learn to be able to communicate with each other. We have lots of kids coming.
I love that.
And especially in the beginning of marriage, communication is a very difficult thing. And we talked last week because men's brains are just wired differently than women's brains. We have boxes that we put things in, and they have this huge spider web where all things are connected. And it's just not like that for us. So that can create some stumbling blocks when it comes to communication. And we need to learn how to overcome that. And we also have to be able to communicate in a healthy way. I shouldn't say men can't communicate. We can communicate, but we don't necessarily communicate in a very healthy way sometimes. So as part of marriage, you're learning that. You're learning how to communicate. You're learning how to listen to each other. Oftentimes, men, we listen for the points and not necessarily what they're saying. And all of these things are learning curves that we have to get through and learn. And the way God made us, and we're such an opposite, she will bring and the woman will draw the men into becoming better communicators. And that's a great thing because it's not a natural thing for us.
And it's so neat. I was the only girl on one side of my family. I had all boys, I had all grandsons, and then I have this granddaughter now. And she's quite far away and she's still super young. But there is still, even at those young ages, such a difference between all of the boys and her. Just huge differences that we see already. And it's kind of amazing looking and going, the way that I communicate with them will be different than the way that I communicate with her. Just because God made us so differently. And it's been a long time learning these things, but how amazing it is later. Generally speaking, like we talked about, and some of this will overlap a little bit in the beginning here from last week, but it's so much easier for women to have those deep conversations. And I realize fully that for some men, it's super easy. We have 3 boys. One of them can talk to you for hours about just about anything, and he's great at it. The other 2, oh my goodness. It's like pulling teeth. We would know something is wrong. And for one, I would literally drive around in the car and say, you're not getting out of the car until you talk to me. I mean, we could be here for a long time. Do you really want to go home? And then he would be like, Mom's not giving up, so I'm going to open up. And he'd always feel better afterward, and he would tell me. Another one I told you about last week, I would sit next to him on the couch and say, text me the issue. Because looking me in the eye, and that was just too hard. We found that men are more comfortable, if you want to have a good conversation, do something. Go fishing, we'll stand side by side, we'll talk. We can get to some amazing places that way.
Yeah, I remember in the beginning of our marriage, I'm like, does she ever run out of words? I'm not even, she's like, I mean, I've never talked that many words in my entire life. And she just never
30
runs
years
out.
later, I still haven't run out.
She still hasn't run out of words.
No. And we did talk about this last week, too, that for women, we kind of wrap a towel around ourselves physically. You know, don't look at me, you know, I gained 2 pounds this week, whatever. And we're very, very just so insecure physically a lot of times. Men do the same thing. They wrap that towel oftentimes with the deeper emotional stuff. They don't see any reason why we got to go there.
No.
And God did, though. God knew that it wasn't good for man to be alone. I think that was one of our scriptures last week. And we needed each other to draw each other out in our weak areas. And so by putting the two of us together, He's forced us to kind of stretch ourselves in those areas that we're not comfortable. And what an amazing combination it is when we look at it through the eyes of God. When we look at it through the eyes of the world, you would think, I mean, the old ball and chain, they call it. But that's not what God intended. He intended for this to be a perfect combination. Not an easy combination, but a perfect combination. And you know what I found out? Is that winning a fight isn't really winning. And I'm one that is a little stubborn. And I always say that God gave me the gift of stubborn. And it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. He also gifted Ryan in the same way. And part of that is why we're still together. Because I wasn't leaving. I might make you miserable, but I'm not leaving. That was good. Now, I've also used it for evil. And when we're in an argument, I want to win. Because you know I'm right. You know what I mean? The problem is, he also knew he was right. And even when I started to see like, ooh, he just made a really good point and I might be wrong, I wasn't going to admit it. You know, when you're young, boy, and so we would go round and round, and both of us wanted to win. And what I realized later, that if one of us won, we probably hurt the relationship. Because that really isn't the point of an argument. People are going to argue. The point was to work things out and for God to help each of us become more holy. Because that's really it. That's what marriage is all about, is to make you closer to Him and to teach you all kinds of amazing things, but instead, we used it for evil. So, winning isn't really winning. Working things out, that's where you win. Because you're on the same team. Mm-hmm. And God's plan is for you to become better and more holy and closer to Him, not the winner of a good battle.
Yeah. It's important to remember the person that you're physically closest to is the most irritating. You know, how many of you have brothers and sisters? I mean, who do you fight with most? Your brothers and your sisters, because when you were growing up, they were the physically closest person to you, and you spent as much time with them. So, you know, as you get married, it's that whole, the closer that sandpaper is to the wood, the smoother those edges get, and that's kind of how marriage works. You know, you irritate each other, but you're doing that because you're rubbing all the rough edges off of each other and learning how to create a family together. And what did I have in there? Oh, and if we could bring up Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That's what marriage does. I mean, selfishness is getting broken off of you, and that's a difficult process as you're learning to take care of someone else. And, you know, because at least for me, I'd lived so many years myself, I'd become a very selfish person, and I didn't know how to open up and bring someone else into that. And that's what marriage does.
Now, we told you last week we used to live in Georgia, for those of you that weren't here. So we were about 18 hours from home. Mm-hmm. And this is just a personality difference, too, that we had to learn to work through. We would drive straight. We didn't have a lot of money back then. And if we were coming home to visit, we would drive the 18 hours straight from Georgia up here to Pennsylvania. If I tried that today, I probably wouldn't make it back here. No. But back then, we used to do it a lot. And there were some major personality differences here, too, because don't we always marry our opposite? We seem to. Ryan is an incredibly good planner. And so guess what he married? I'm a fly by the seat of your pants. Are we going on vacation? We'll figure it out when we get there. Let's decide on a place to go, and woohoo, we're going to have a blast. And here's Ryan. Well, yeah, we're going to have fun, but we need to know, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's probably when we're going to do it, and let's... I'm like, that's no fun. Yeah. So we're on our way back from Georgia, 18 hours, we're getting a little hungry, it's lunchtime, and he said to me, what do you feel like eating? Now that should be a simple question. And I know we hear a lot of couples say that the woman can't ever decide. Well, I can decide. And I told him, about the area we were in, we always pass this Ryan Steakhouse. And because it's such a long trip, we try to at least have one meal that we pulled off the road and get out of the car and sit and eat. But that was a mistake. Because of the planner in him, he was going to find that Ryan Steakhouse. Well, 2 hours later, as it was always going to be in the next exit, we've got to be close now, right? I looked at him and I said, you better pull this. I don't care where we eat. I don't care. I don't care if somebody is selling a sandwich by the side of the road, you pull this car over and you feed me right now, because I've gone beyond hungry and I am hangry, and this is not going to work. Feed the woman.
Yeah, but I was confident that the next exit, and we were going to pull off somewhere and eat, and then get back in the car, and there it was going to be.
And see, in his planner brain, he was like, man, she said Ryan Steakhouse, I'm going to take her where she wants to go. I learned quick. So the next time that happened, he said, you getting hungry? Yep, I am. Where do you want to go? I'll tell you when I see it.
That was smart. All right.
Yes. But now I want to add one more thing. Years later, after we had kids, this was before kids, we'd planned a big vacation, and we didn't do a lot of big vacations. We planned a trip down to Disney. And I'll tell you what, it's amazing when you start looking at things differently. Him being the planner that he is, he planned out, okay, this is about what it's going to cost to stay, this is what the tickets are going to cost. He had everything, and me being the fly by the seat of my pants, I said, yeah, but what if we want to change our mind? He's great with that. And he said, well, we can change our mind, but at least we've accounted for these things. And you know what? I now use that, because what a benefit that is. We can still change our mind and fly a little bit by the seat of our pants, or mine, because I'm the one that's more like that. But we would come home with money left, because he'd planned. And sometimes we might take from one area and put in another, but the planner in him has saved us so many times. And the fly by the seat of my pants person has allowed us to do things and have fun that we may have missed. So God does this intentionally. And when we use it for our good, like we keep repeating, it can be so awesome. At first, it wasn't, because we drove each other crazy.
Yeah. Well, since we're telling traveling stories, I'll tell a traveling story.
There's nothing else on the list.
I know it's not on the list. I'm going to add this one to the list. So we live down in... It's right. I'm doing a little prompting there.
Thanks.
So we lived down in St. Mary's, Georgia. So like she said, it was about 18 hours away from home. But all you had to do was get on I-95. You get on I-95 and it's like 700 miles straight. And then you just go home. Right? So I had worked the night before, and we had gotten up really early, and I was exhausted, but I will get you on I-95, we'll pull over at the first rest stop, and we're good. So I got her on I-95. This is before GPS. We didn't have no cell phones. You had big atlases you pulled out of the back, and you worked it out. Pulled over at the rest stop. She started driving. I'm in there. I go to sleep, and I don't know how long I was asleep, but the next thing I know, the car's like, and I'm like, wake up. We're on a dirt road. I mean, all you had to do was go straight. You know, she's over there, she's like white knuckling. I'm like, where are we? I don't know where we are. But we were on 95. All you had to do was go. We still don't know how we ended up off of I-95. But we waited till we found another street, got the atlas back out. Okay, here we are. Let's get back on the highway.
And to this day, he still doesn't sleep well in the car when I drive.
I mean, how does one mess that up? Just go straight. Which brings us to fighting fair in marriage. If you could put up Ephesians 5:25. If we gave you that one, yeah. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for it. It'd be foolish to say you're not going to fight when you get married, because you're going to fight. But you have to fight in a way that doesn't damage your relationship as it moves forward. And, you take that scripture, Jesus did one of the hardest things that's ever been done, ever. He got up on that cross. He took all of our sins. He died so that we could have salvation. And then he turns around and he tells the men, do for your wife what I just did for your church, or for the church. I mean, that's tough, and we have to learn how to lay down our lives for our spouse, just like Jesus did. And to do that, we have to control how we fight. And I think I brought it up last time, but I always, when we did youth ministry for a lot of years, and when we would talk to the kids about their words, we would say it's just like a tube of toothpaste. When you're throwing those words out there, you're squeezing that out of that tube. And then when it's all over, and you want to say, okay, we're all done, let me put that back in you can't. You can't get the toothpaste back into the tube, and you can't take away the words that you said. So when you fight, you need to stick to issues and things and not each other. The power of life and death is in the tongue. So I need to, I'm not saying that your wife is always right and you just roll over and take it. Get your points out, but do it in a way that doesn't damage her, and she needs to do it in a way that doesn't damage you, because I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to say that. I early on in our marriage, we would be fighting, and I wasn't listening to her to find out what the problem was. I was listening for her for my rebuttal. I needed to, like she said, I needed to win this. So I'm barely hearing what she's actually saying. I'm waiting for her to mess up. Oh, wait a minute. Just 5 minutes ago, you said it was because of this. Now you've changed it to this. Obviously, I'm right. That your whole case is nothing. But that, and you can't do that. You have to learn, and that communication. I had to learn to listen to her, because, we're not just fighting for no reason. We're fighting because there's a reason. And if as guys, if we can't slow down and listen and figure out what the issue is, then we can't fix it. And I could win the fight, but I want to fix and make our relationship better. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
And if we go back to that first scripture.
Buttons. Go ahead.
It's bad when he gets excited about a part, when we go back to that first scripture that says everyone should take note of this in James 1:19, that everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. How many of us are the opposite of that? I was completely. I was quick to speak. I was very quick to become angry, but I was, again, not slow to listen at all. I didn't listen. I didn't listen at all. And what I really needed to do was take a step back, shut my mouth, and seriously listen to him. And that's really hard. And we live in such a microwave society that everything is fast. You got to get done with everything. We need to take that breather, and we need to look at each other, and we need to really hear each other. And in our arguments, the whole, being slow to speak, we talked over each other. We didn't care if the other person was listening. We just wanted to make our points quicker and usually louder and stronger. And then later, you make those passive-aggressive comments to each other, because even though the fight may have ended, the buttons are still being pushed just a little on the way by. And so our fights could last for days when they needed to last 5 minutes. And I don't recommend all-out fights and things, but there's going to be arguments. There has to be in life. The people you're closest to, like he said, they're the ones that you're going to be around the most. So those annoying little things happen, or you get off of 95 and you irritate the other person because you're 10 miles out of your way and you don't know how you got there. Those little accidents are going to happen. But if you can listen to each other and get through it, you can become so much stronger. And women, I think even more than men, we tend to keep that record of wrongs. Because our brains are so intertwined. Oh, I can remember the year we first got married, and you annoyed me with this, and now you did it again here, and you did it again. You're doing it again today. And he's like, I locked that away in that box years ago, but I keep bringing it back up. And sometimes we have to learn not to do that either. Because I'll tell you what, we've been married, I think, about 30 years this coming September.
About?
30 years this coming September. It feels like more. I'm going to get
credit for every one of those years.
Some days it feels like a lot longer. No, but There are issues that are still hot spots. And I can tell you right now, I'm not going to list them because we're all different and you all have them, but there are a couple issues right now that I could start a blinger on the way home because I know that we're just not quite on the same page after all these years. And I looked at people like my grandparents who'd been married forever, and I thought, by then, they've probably got it all worked out. No. You never stop growing. You never stop changing. And there are some issues that when you have two completely different people and two completely different opinions, sometimes they're just not issues that you work out overnight or after 30 years. So we've compromised, and neither one of us is completely happy with those compromises. But that's okay too, because God's not done with either one of us.
That's right.
And so we're still growing and changing. And I have quit believing that next year things are going to be all perfectly worked out, like I did when I was 20. I just know that next year, we're still going to be fighting. And we're fighting for the same thing this time instead of fighting against each other. And that makes all the difference.
And you know, when you're fighting, like she was talking about, if you've been married for any length of time, you've learned what the buttons are. And so a lot of times it's a decision. You know, do I push that button? Or do I make a better decision and not push that button? Because, you know, each one of us knows she could wind me right up till I'm saying bad things up here probably, and I could wind her up till she loses it too, because I know where all those buttons are. And so, sometimes you get into the moment and you push the button anyway, and then you have to live with consequences. So we're all human. But as we've been married longer, we've learned not to push those buttons. And, that's just part of the growth. And, but you're going to fall off the wagon every once in a while and push the button just because it's just what happens. And, not every issue has to be taken care of right then. There are some issues that you need to put aside for a little bit and come back to. What you can't do is what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to take the issue, put it in the back, and then never talk about it again. Not resolve it, not deal with it, and that's not okay. But it is okay to just say, hey, we're going to agree to disagree for this moment, and we're going to go take care of that, and then we're going to come back to it. I just would never want to come back to it. So I've had to learn that, yep, I'm taking a pause, but it's not a permanent pause. We're going to have to go back and we're going to have to readdress it.
I also think that's why God put two different people together. It's because he may want to put it aside and he may want to say that he's going to come back to it and then kind of ignore it. But God made me a little bit of a pit bull, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But he wasn't going to put it aside and not come back to it because I was there to remind him that we were going to come back to it. Yeah. Now, we do that in a lot healthier ways today, but I pulled him out of that avoidance, and he calms me down because I don't need to be a pit bull. That's really not the nice way to handle it. But when I was young boy, and the Bible says you don't go to bed angry. Buddy, we could be up for days, but we're going to get this solved.
Hey, we could fight. I mean, I remember driving down the road one time fighting so bad people were beeping their horns at us.
It's so embarrassing. It really
is.
But I'm so thankful because only God could get us where we are today, too. And those two kids back then are so different today. So the other thing that this is just something that has been such a help to us. We lived back in Georgia in 15 minutes from this boat that went to Cumberland Island. And if you've ever been to South Georgia, it's near Amelia Island, that kind of area. And it was gorgeous. And the neat thing about Cumberland is it was cheap. It was like $5 a person back then. And they only took 2 boats a day. So you would get out on this island and have like 100 to 200 yards of beach to yourself. We would take a picnic lunch. Back then, there wasn't even a hotel on the island, and it was so cool. Today, I think there is. And we would go out there, and we'd had this agreement. And we would say, today is not a day for those issues, because we had them. And I mean, we would spend, like I said, days fighting. I mean, just not getting anything accomplished. And every once in a while, we'd say, okay, we got to take a break. Like, we're done here. And so we'd go out on the island, and we would just say, today's a fun day. That's it. We're not talking about issues. It's okay to take a break from them sometimes. And what I found was so amazing is that when we would come home from that day, a lot of those little teeny things that are nipping at you, the stuff that really is just stupid, like who squeezes the toothpaste from the center? Like, who does that? And it used to drive me crazy. And so we would be nipping at all those little things that really, come on. There's such easier solutions than getting mad over toothpaste. But again, 20-some-year-old me thought it was worth fighting over. Or like the toilet paper, I mean, it really needs to go this way, not against the wall. Or it doesn't need to be set on top. I mean, thanks for getting a new roll, because it's always a nice surprise when you get in the bathroom and there's no roll. So thanks for getting the roll, but it's a 2-second thing to just slip it over. And so we would go out on Cumberland, and these little stupid things that we were fighting so bad about, they all seem to disappear a little bit. And you're still left with the issues, and you still got to come back to the big stuff. But sometimes getting away from it is a really good choice, because it just lets off that. What's that?
I said you're killing me, Smalls.
I think we're up to you now. So.
And I know I talked about it a little bit at the end last time, but have those little things on the calendar to look forward to. And it doesn't have to be a big trip or a cruise. It can be maybe grandparents are going to watch the kids for an afternoon, so you can go up to Pisgah and take a walk or go out to eat or do something. But having those little things to look forward to, it really just helps you get through, what you're going through and be excited. Having something to be excited about. Ooh, yeah, this is just a personal thing for me. When you fight, don't use the word divorce. That's just an awful thing to do. To hold that over their heads, it's really just a nasty way to fight. You're not going to divorce. You're going to sit here and you're going to work it out. So don't use that word when you fight. And again, it's one of those things, and I don't know if I talk about it here, but I'm going to talk about it. Your marriage will only go as high as your words are. If you want your marriage to be up here, but your words are down here, this is where your marriage is going to be. Your words have to be here first. You have to speak the things that you want in your marriage, and you have to say those things before your marriage can get there. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? You can't be knocking each other down and saying all these awful things and then expect to have your marriage up here. You have to say that. The power of life and death is in the tongue, and it affects your marriage. Mm-hmm. And I know I did that out of turn.
Okay. Honesty, we're going to go a little bit into that now, because honesty is super important. But again, I used honesty as a weapon. And, God's word says that we are supposed to let our yes be yes and our no be no. We're supposed to be honest. And I'll use a different example. I have a good friend of mine that years ago, after she'd had a couple of kids, she'd gained a couple of pounds. And she asked her husband, she said, do I look fat? Now, you guys know that's right there.
Ooh,
Any man in this room,
that is a trap.
And her husband, well, I'm supposed to be honest, right? He said, yeah, you do. And I'll tell you what, she was already low anyway, and she already felt bad about herself. And honesty should never be used as a weapon like that. Now, what he could have said is, you're beautiful to me, but if you don't feel good about yourself, then why don't we start taking a walk? Or, because I want you to feel good about yourself. He could have done it so many different ways. But instead, and I am thankful, because no matter what I've looked like, what I've weighed, whether I've, been pregnant with our kids or right afterwards when you feel so bad, that's one thing I can say we never had an issue with. Ryan has always been amazing about making me feel good. He really has. Even when I can look in the mirror and been like, wow, I had way too many cheeseburgers last year, whatever. He will look at me and say, you're perfect. You are perfect for me. And you look beautiful.
Well, there was that purple sweatshirt that you wore when you were pregnant.
So he learned a lesson.
So I might have said something about that.
Do you ever have that really comfy, and this was not on the script either, but that really comfy midwinter thing that you put on and it's baggy and you just feel so good? Well, I was pregnant with our son, and I don't have much of a torso, so when I get pregnant, whoa. And I had this awesome, big purple sweatshirt that I loved. And I was pregnant for our second son, Zach, who was almost 10 pounds. I don't have room for 5 pounds, so 10 pounds, and it was ridiculous. And I said, I just want to be comfy. Get me that sweatshirt. And he went in, he got me that sweatshirt. And this is like the biggest sweatshirt ever.
It took two of us to get that puppy over that.
It did. It's so bad. And it stretched. And he couldn't help himself. He laughed. He goes, oh my gosh, you look like a big purple grape.
Yeah. Hey, let me put some context to this, because she would get so big when she was pregnant. We were at Walmart one time, and this lady comes up to her, and she's like, ma'am, how far along are you? And is it, she said, are you having twins? And Nikki's like, no. She yells across the store, Martha, it's only one baby.
I was with Ryan and his mom tells the story to this day because she screamed it. And the other lady's like, no way.
Yeah. That was a rough night at home.
So after he called me the big purple grape and I cried,
Yeah,
he
sorry.
learned.
I did learn. I learned.
I don't know where we are. No idea.
She'd get stuck in the bathtub. I'm like, great, I know where you're going to be.
I think you're here.
Yeah, out here. Oh gosh, this is not good. So the number one predictor of divorce is criticism.
I'm just really glad that he's on that part right now.
Every good marriage needs to have a positive tone. When we're courting, when we're dating, and when we're building a relationship, we're attracted to the people who praise us, who say good things about us. We're not attracted to the people who criticize us. And marriage is no different. You have to have that tone of praise in your marriage, and they need to hear us say those things.
Mm-hmm. There was one specific time that he didn't even mean for me to hear this, and it was just the best. We were at his class reunion, and I was talking to some of the girls in his class that I knew, and he was way across the room, and it was time to eat, so I swung around. And I was just coming over, like I said, to get to our table, and as I came up behind him, the conversation went a little bit like this. His friend was saying, oh my gosh, you work with your wife? Because back then he was an elementary technology teacher. We rode to work together. We rode home together. We spent summers together. I mean, we were together like 24 hours a day. And he said, I couldn't stand it. I mean, this guy was like, oh, I'd kill her. And I heard Ryan say, you know what? I love it. I can picture us as little old people sitting on our porches, rocking in our rocking chairs 24 hours a day, and I love every minute of it. Now, from where we came from to that moment, and it did something to me because he meant it. I mean, he didn't know I was listening, so he wasn't making it up to make me feel good, what we think in our heads. He meant it. And just that alone, I told him about it later. I said, I heard what you said. And what a great rest of our day that we had because it made me feel so good to know that my husband would choose me. And he doesn't mind being with me all the time. We also went to another picnic, it was about 2 years ago, where this couple had come from a wedding. And openly, the wife standing right next to him, they said, oh, how was the wedding? The other people at the picnic. And he's like, yeah, it was nice, but the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, buddy, don't do it. Don't do it. Do you know what you're getting into? And his wife is standing there smiling, but you could see she's uncomfortable. Talk about two different scenarios. I don't want to stand there next to him while he tells somebody, don't get married.
No.
I mean, what does that mean? It's a horrible thing to say. So what he did made me feel so good. And I know we mentioned this last week too, but this is worth repeating also. We can't read each other's minds. And he'll say to me things.
Well, she might be able to read my mind because there's not a lot going on. It's more of I can't read her mind.
Well, that may be true, But it works both ways at times. And we have to tell them what we want. And I have had friends and things that will say, I told my husband I would really like it if he brought me flowers. And like 2 days later, he brought me flowers. But I know he only did it because I told him to. Well, yes. I mean, you told him what you wanted. He thought to himself, I'm going to bring her flowers. He provided that, and now you're mad? Well, what I really wanted him to do was like out of the blue. Well, did you tell him that? Like, hey, this was awesome. Thank you so much. And you know what? So many months out of the blue, I'd love it if you did more of that. And then he goes, okay, this one goes in that permanent box where I think to myself, ooh, flowers. I should grab them. She'll be happy. It'll make our day. Good. Well, I shouldn't have to tell him. Listen, we've all got a lot going on in our lives. And if you really have something you need and you choose not to tell them, or it works both ways, they can't meet that need. We're all so different. We have to be okay with open honesty, telling them what we want, and then being happy when they do it. And no, they didn't just do it because you told them. They did it because they love you, and you finally told them what they could do to show that. So be happy about it.
Yeah, we need that. Like, if there are things, if you tell us something and we can remember it and actually follow through, you should be excited. Because we need some wins here. We do.
And there are times when things are really good in our relationship, but one of us doesn't feel like we're connecting. And we've gotten to the place now, early on in our marriage, I would think, man, things are okay, but I just don't feel like we're connecting. And then I would tell him or he would tell me, and it's kind of like blindsided a little bit. But life is busy, and now I'll just say to him, hey, I just don't feel like we're connected like we were. And he'll be like, okay, well then we need to plan a time for each other. And we might be just coffee on the back porch some morning, and we spend hours just chatting and goofing and whatever. It also could be a date night. But, marriages can seem really good, but you still need a little extra here and there. And that's what we've learned to do. There'll be times when I think things are great. We've talked, we've done all those things that I really need, and he'll say, I don't know why, but I just need this, or I just need a little more time, or whatever. And so we just plan that. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong, but we need to be able to tell each other when those things happen.
But communication is the big piece in that. You have to communicate those things. Moping around the house and being miserable because your needs aren't being met is different than going to your spouse and say, hey, I don't feel like we're connecting. And that's what we, for quite a few years, when one of us didn't feel like they were connecting or weren't getting the things that we needed, instead of communicating that, we were just miserable. And apparently you're supposed to read into that miserableness that they're not happy, and I'm just trying to avoid her because I don't want to be around a miserable person. So it's really all about communicating. You came into this marriage because you wanted to build a life together. So communicate that. Talk to each other. Tell each other what you need. Well, I shouldn't have to tell him. Well, yeah, you kind of do have to tell him because, you think he's picking up on all these clues you're dropping. Nope, he is not picking up on anything. So that kind of thing. And it gets us into accountability. Tons of couples get into trouble with accountability. Well, you got married, right? Of course you're accountable to each other. If you didn't want to be accountable to somebody, then why did you get married? Well, I shouldn't have to tell my spouse when I'm... Yeah, you do. You have to tell them. They need to know, and I need to know, because we're one. God said we'll leave our parents and we'll come together and become one flesh. Well, guess what? You're accountable to each other. And on a practical sense, I always call my wife and say, hey, I'm headed home from work. For two reasons. One, we live in Pennsylvania and we have snowstorms. I don't want to be sitting out in a snowdrift somewhere and no one even knows I left work. Two, I don't want to get home to find out that, oh yeah, I need you to pick up milk. Great. Get back in the car and go back to town and it's those little things. But then she's not insecure because she knows where I'm at. And I think you talk about the phones and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, from the time we've gotten married, this has not been one of our issues, but we have found that it is for a lot of people. In fact, we did a marriage conference for our church. It's been probably 5 years ago, and we split the couples up, and we had these little short talks between just him with just the men and me with just the women. And what we found was a lot of people really, he should just trust me. Why does he need to see my cell phone? I should have some privacy. We were kind of shocked at the number of people that really, really, really had a problem with that. And I'll tell you what, we haven't, but some of it I think was just plain laziness. If my phone's in the kitchen and I don't have to get out of my chair, please, Ryan, just check that message. If it's important, he'll bring it to me. But we've never had to hide anything on here. And the other day, well, it's been a couple months now, I said to him, will you check my phone? He's like, sure. He had put his face in my phone because he didn't want to bother with the password anymore. I didn't even know he did it. I said, you have
just easier.
I said, you have put your face in my... Yes. I didn't even know, and I didn't care. And I'll tell you what, if there is anything in here that I'm typing or viewing or anything that he can't see, then there is a problem with me. Because I shouldn't be doing or saying anything that he can't look at. Really. He's my husband. He's my best friend in this entire world. And he's the one that I have to be able to count on when things are great and when things are terrible. And if he can't trust me to check a text message or whatever, then there's a bigger issue. And the same with his stuff. Emails, computers, I never pick up his cell phone and go through it because I have complete access to it anyway. I wouldn't have to. And if his phone goes off, and I'm there, I check that. It's just so much easier in the long run when he can completely trust me and that I can completely trust him in those areas. It takes a lot of the questions out of it.
Well, and if I have to hide what I'm doing, then there's a problem. And one, I don't have the energy to hide anything anymore. But it is, keep your accountability in marriage is important because trust doesn't just happen. I mean, yeah, you may be entering into the marriage with a certain level of trust, but trust is something that you build. Trust is something that you create between each other, and trying to live a separate life that's separate from your spouse, that's not how trust is built.
Well, and trust can be built or broken in one decision.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a whole lot longer to rebuild trust than it does to maintain it.
Yeah.
And I would much rather just maintain it. Yeah, and I'm going to jump right in here because if I don't sell myself out, he will.
Oh.
So here's what happened early on. I had gone to the dentist, and we were down in Georgia, and I kept saying to the guy, I'm like, listen, this is really hurting. I don't think it's working. The Novocaine's not working. Just another minute, I'll be done. Just another minute. Well, it was terrible. And so I got home. These are all my excuses, by the way. I'm not saying it's okay to make excuses, but I've got a couple. So then we were in the infomercial years. You remember all those infomercials? I mean, every product was going to change your life for the better, save you. And it just so happened that the infomercial that came on the TV when I came home from the dentist was for this very special toothbrush. And this toothbrush was going to save me from ever having those dental experiences again. Now, we didn't have very much money back then, and I think I only had a part-time job, right, at the time. I don't even know, I don't remember. But what I do remember is that I spent a lot of money on a toothbrush that we could not afford because it was going to save all my dental problems. And, I mean, it came with two, so that makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
It was like $70, but that really is only $35 a piece if we break it down.
And $20 shipping.
And I mean, I knew, and it was one of those impulse things that as soon as I did it, I'm like, oh my gosh. I so wanted to hide it from him because I knew he was going to be mad, and rightfully so. And by the way, this toothbrush did not work at all. Well, he came home, and I said, well, I got something I need to tell you. What? I said, I bought a toothbrush. He wasn't all that upset until I explained what kind of toothbrush I had bought, and that it was this Ionic special $70 toothbrush that there wasn't money for. And he goes, are you joking? Please, God, tell me this is a joke. And I said, no, Rye, here's the reasons I did it, and I realized I shouldn't have. And he was a little bit mad. We got through it. And we came up with some other compromises because of my behavior. We now, and to this day, now it's natural. But back then it was like, okay, let's make a deal here. We can't spend over a certain amount of money, I can't remember what we decided on then, without talking to each other first. Doesn't mean you can't have the stupid toothbrush, Nicki, but maybe you could just run it by me to make sure there's still money to pay the bills afterwards, okay? And so from then on, it just became natural that we check with each other before we do make purchases. It depends on the amount. We obviously have all that. But at that time, I am so glad I chose to tell him, because it was a bad decision on my part, and he was mad. But he doesn't have to worry about me hiding receipts or keeping a pair of shoes in the car and only bringing one pair in at a time. I've heard that from people before. I'll just bring in, because then he doesn't know I spent all this all at once. I lay the receipts on the table, good and bad. And he doesn't have that worry, because I think I said this last week, if one receipt from a store I have to hide from him, that's what my marriage is worth, and I need to rethink some things. Because I'd rather lay it on the table and make that decision and him know that he can trust me tomorrow, then now we're rebuilding trust because I hid something in the car or however it goes.
Yeah. And it really boils down to is, what do you want? Do you want to build a relationship that you have with your best friend that you're excited about going through marriage and life with? Or do you want to try to cover up all this stuff and lie? And let's be honest, men, we're not equipped to lie. I mean, we can tell a lie, but our problem is it takes no effort whatsoever to tell the truth. You just tell the truth. But you start telling lies, you got to remember what they were. And you have to keep that thing going. It's tons of effort, and we're not equipped for that. That's what we're going to mess up.
You're going to get caught.
And we're going to get
all
caught.
gonna get caught.
So it's just tell the truth and deal with it as it happens. And actually some of that was my problem, because I didn't want to deal with problems, so I would just hide things and lie about things, and not realizing what issues I was creating. Just don't do it. Just tell the truth. Deal with whatever it is. You'll get through it. Your marriage will be better. But if you lie about it, I'm telling you right now, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you, and it's going to be so much worse not dealing with it at the moment than, a year down the line it comes out that you had been lying about this. Woo. That's where that whole, you go, one stupid decision can break 15 years of trust, and then you have to rebuild all that, and that's tough, and it's not necessary.
And one of the...
And we didn't get married to act like you're single, right? If you want to act like you're single, then stay single. If you're getting married, it's because you want to build this life and this relationship, and you can't build it on lies.
No, and you also better be real good at forgiveness, just like Jesus was. That's just throughout Scripture. We see it by his own example. And you know what? We're married to two really imperfect people. It's just truth. We are in a fallen world, and until Jesus comes back, it's the way that it is. So I am going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to let him down. It's not intentional, but it happens. And the same for him. He's going to say things that hurt my feelings sometimes, like call me a big purple grape. Sometimes it'll be accident. Sometimes it'll be even intentional. But we better be really good at forgiving each other the way that Jesus did. Because without forgiveness, you all know people that can hold a grudge for like 1,000,000 years. How healthy is that? It's easy to do because some things cut deep. But the truth is that wasn't the way that it was intended. We need to forgive. For unforgiveness is like a noose around our own neck. It doesn't allow us to go forward. It doesn't allow us to grow as a person. And you know what? If Jesus can do it for all the garbage that I've done and he's forgiven me for, then I can do it. And so that's the way we look at that. Forgiveness is super, super important.
It is, and I always fall back on what God's forgiven us for. And if he can do that, then we can do that. And I think she talked about it a little bit, but it's that don't keep that list of wrongs. If it's happened and you've talked about it and you've dealt with it and you've come to, a conclusion to what's going on and the changes that are going to be made, 3 months from now, don't throw that in the other person's face again. It's done. It's over. Just like God says, his sins are as far from the east as the west. If you are going to continuously bring up the wrongs that the other person has done, that you've said that you've forgiven them, that's not real forgiveness. And you can't build your marriage and your relationship on that. So if I've told you I've forgiven you, then I've forgiven you, and we're going to move on. Now, I'm going to be mad if you do it again, and rightfully so in both ways, but I'm not going to bring up the past.
I told Ryan a long time ago that he's seen me at some of my worst. He's also seen me at some of my most embarrassing moments. And so if it comes down to nothing else, he is not getting out of this deal, because I'm not letting him out of the house with all that information. There is no way. You are staying, and I'm keeping it locked up.
Oh, gosh. I feel like I'm going to be on an episode of True Crimes or something, an episode of True Crimes. Missing Man in Windfall.
Depends if it goes off script again.
And I always get a kick out of that whole, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence nonsense. Well, you know what? It is greener on the other side of the fence because you don't get to see how much fertilizer is being dumped on that yard on the other side of that fence. That's why it's green.
Yep. And even this stuff, most of the stuff that we share up here, we've covered ahead of time. There are maybe some stories and things that both of us know. It's just not the time, and no, I'm not going to share all of those. You kind of have to have each other's backs. You really do. And so I know if he goes a little bit off script up here, it's going to be okay. When we first started doing this stuff, I panicked. I'm like, what's he going to say? Oh, please. So you have to know that you can trust that in each other, too.
Okay. And we got to close it up. We're out of time. Slow down, make time for each other, do those things for them. And I'm going to skip out. I'm going to go right to what I want to. You want to do your statistics first?
Yeah.
All right, you do that.
So one of the things that obviously, well, actually, it is the only thing that changed our marriage, is drawing near to God. And all of these little hints and these little things that we've talked about by sharing some of our stories with you all came from one place, and it's the Lord. If he hadn't stepped in when he did, we would not be together today, and we know it. And we give him all the glory and everything. And I found this recently, and I thought, here's where it is. It doesn't matter whether you have issues in your marriage or with your kids or with your finances. There was a Lifeway did a research project. And in that research project, they polled 40,000 people. And there's been others too, but this one is the one that I was looking at. 40,000 people's ages 8 to 80. And all they were looking for at the time is to see how many times a week that these Christians were reading their Bibles. So that was the population, the Christian population. And what they found was way beyond what they expected. They were just looking to see how many times Christians read their Bibles. But here's what actually came out of the research. If you read your Bible one time per week, and that included going to church, there was no change in the person. No change. If you read your Bible up to 3 times per week, 1 and 2, no change. 3 times, all of a sudden, there was like a little change in the person. Just a little. But then, those people that read their Bibles 4 times or more per week had a drastic results that were just unprecedented. You see, the Bible says that this word is active, it's living, it's sharper than a double-edged sword, it's able to cut between joints and marrow, it is life-changing. I look at it like God's love letter to me. And when I saw this research, oh my goodness, because we live in a society where people are lonelier than ever, and they have all of these issues, but listen to this. They found that loneliness, when people read their Bibles 4 times or more per week, just them and God, dropped 30%. Anger issues dropped 32%. Bitterness in relationships dropped 40%. Alcoholism dropped 57%. Sex outside of marriage dropped 68%. Feeling spiritually stagnant dropped 60%. Viewing pornography dropped 61%. Sharing your faith increased 200%, and discipling others, wanting to see other Christians grow and become strong and healthy, increased 230%. You know, if you only eat 1 meal a week, you're not going to be a strong, healthy person. If you only eat 3 meals a week, your body is not going to be healthy. And when I read this research and I thought, if I only read this life-giving book once a week, I'm not going to be spiritually healthy. You know, we need to eat of this word, like the Bible says. We need to eat of it all throughout our week. And if we do, it'll change not only our marriage, but our lives. And it's amazing to me because what changed us, what got us on the right path, is we walked into a church service one day, and we were struggling, and we really weren't in our word very much. And the Lord moved on both of us that day. And we walked out of that church service, and he looked at me and he said, nothing's ever going to be the same. And I said, I know. And it was all God. And we've been in the Word ever since. And this is the reason that we have this testimony to give. It's the reason we're not fighting like we used to be. It's the reason we have a healthier view of things. It's not us. You guys knew that already. It's this. And now the research is coming around, and it's proving it over and over, because you're never going to beat God. He's got us. He's 100% for us. And if we will eat as much of his word as we do everything else, man, can you imagine? So if you get nothing else out of this, go to God. He's what can do anything all the time for you and for your needs.
All right, and what I wanted to leave everyone with is a practical thing to do. If you want your marriage to be stronger, if you're just starting out in marriage, you need to pray out loud over your spouse. Not just, oh, I'm praying for you. No, they need to hear your conversation with God about them. She needs me to put my hand on her and cry out to God for the things that I want in our marriage and her, and lift her up and build her up, and she needs to hear that. And I need to hear her pray to God.
Why is it so much easier to fight with him than to pray for him? And when we first started praying for each other, it was so awkward to me. I don't know why. I think it's just the enemy out there trying to beat down the healthy things of God. But when we first started praying for each other, it was so uncomfortable. And now, sometimes he wishes I was a little more short-winded.
I'm like, I gotta go. No. Well, no, because we do a small group in our house, and that's one of the things that we did in that is we started encouraging everyone and teaching, because it's uncomfortable.
I don't know why.
I don't know why it is either, but that will change your whole lives. Mm-hmm. That will change your marriage. That will change the tone. That will change everything. And that will give you a strong foundation for a new marriage. Pray for your spouse out loud. Mm-hmm. Not this whole, no. God, I just love this woman. Thank you for bringing her into my life, Lord. And I wouldn't be here if you hadn't given me her. Those things, she needs to hear that. She needs to know that she's the reason for why I'm happy. She's the reason for why I'm so excited about being married. And, and as we're going through struggles, she needs to hear me lift those struggles up to God and in an audible way. Mm-hmm. So I want to leave everyone with that. I know last week I said put something on your calendar to be excited about. Well, this week, pray for your spouse out loud. And learn how to do that. And then as you're married and you have kids, pray for your kids. Need to hear it too. One, they need to hear you guys praying for each other, but they need to hear you pray for them. They need to know what you think and what you're crying out to God for in their lives. And it's just a huge life-changing experience.
So, thank you all for having us.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate it. We do. Thank you.